Welcome to our second episode of Myeloma Crowd TV. I'm Jenny Ahlstrom, a myeloma patient like you. At the recent American Society of Hematology conference, immunotherapy made a big splash. Immunotherapy can mean a wide variety of treatments. In today's episode, we'll be focusing on just one, vaccines. When you think about vaccines, you may think about preventing disease, but these myeloma vaccines are meant to eliminate disease. You may have heard the most about vaccines in myeloma with the measles vaccine. Dr. Stephen Russell of the Mayo Clinic used enough measles vaccine to inoculate 10 million people. The virus was tested in a handful of patients, and one patient, Stacy Erholtz, had a dramatic response. Even when she had failed transplant and many other therapies, this vaccine brought her into extended and complete remission.
We went through the classic sort of phase 1 study pathway where we start with a very low, some would say homeopathic dose of virus, and we gradually increase the dose between cohorts of 3 patients until finally, 2 years ago, we reached the top dose level, which was a huge amount of virus given into a vein. The purpose being for the virus to seek out, attack, infect, and destroy the myeloma cells. We got to the very top dose, and the second patient that we treated at that dose level had a remarkable response. And that was Stacy Erholtz, who was at the time 49 years old. She'd had myeloma for several years. She'd had 2 stem cell transplants. She'd become refractory to Cybor-D therapy and to Revlimid plus dexamethasone therapy, and her disease was relapsing about 8 months out from her most recent stem cell transplant. And she really had the most dramatic response. A single intravenous infusion of the virus led to complete resolution of her myeloma at all sites in the bone marrow and these plasmacytomas. You know, she's the first patient ever anywhere with any cancer type to have such a response to intravenously administered oncolytic virus.
Now the goal is to create more outcomes like Stacy's. A clinical trial is underway and is a collaboration between the Mayo Clinic and the Myeloma Institute at the University of Arkansas, between Dr. Fritz van Rhee and Dr. Stephen Russell. The goal of the trial is to replicate and improve upon the amazing results that Stacy had now that the doctors are armed with additional information from the phase 1 and 2 trials at the Mayo Clinic. In this trial, the measles vaccine is combined with cyclophosphamide or Cytoxan to give the vaccine more time to work before the body's immune system wakes up and prevents the virus from killing the myeloma cells. The trial is also using a lower dose of the measles vaccine because it's being paired with Cytoxan.
So the hope is that we let the virus replicate longer in the body and better efficacy and delay the immune response.
For more information about this trial, you can check out the contact information below or give them a call at 1-888-MYELOMA. A phase 1 and 2 study in Israel was completed for a peptide vaccine that targets a protein found on myeloma and other solid tumor cells, but not on normal cells. This protein is called MUC1. According to the study investigator, Dr. Michael Shapira, on Myeloma Crowd Radio, MUC1 is commonly found on about 70% of myeloma cells. Vaxil Biotherapeutics founder Dr. Lior Carmon tells us more.
In scientific studies, the American National Cancer Institute ranked the top 75 cancer antigen, in which MUC1 resulted as the second best antigen.
Using a vaccine to target a specific protein is not an easy task. In some instances, the vaccine has to be customized for each patient to their HLA type.
Just to make it clear that in the past it was very difficult to induce immunity against tumor cells with a very specific protein. We had to make specific protein per type of HLA, which is the biological ID of our cells. That made it very difficult to make immunotherapy as a wide and acceptable treatment because you had to have a specific drug per patient.
According to Dr. Shapira, the vaccine had a single agent response, which means that patients were not on an IMiD or chemo or proteasome inhibitor. They just used the vaccine and then kept giving doses periodically as maintenance therapy.
We found that all patients responded to the vaccine. This was actually truly amazing for me because peptides are known to be very low inductors of immunity. I was really astonished by the fact that all patients developed specific immunity against the Imucin.
Importantly, in selected patients, a significant reduction in the percentage of plasma cells post versus pre-treatment with Imucin was observed.
A maintenance treatment with few side effects, one that doesn't suppress your immune system, and a periodic shot from a walk-in clinic sounds pretty appealing to patients.
A recent Imucin milestone we were pleased to achieve this summer was receiving an orphan drug status in multiple myeloma from the EMA, the European Medicine Agency, and the United States FDA. This regulatory milestone serves to both validate and enhance our science.
So where are they headed next with this?
Our next clinical trial, a robust phase 2, is set to include patients with very good partial response and MRD positive post first line of therapy, and we hope it will drive us into a pivotal phase 3, possibly with a big pharma partner.
Smoldering myeloma patients typically have to endure a watch and wait status. One vaccine has been developed just for high and medium risk smoldering myeloma patients and is now in clinical trials.
So Oncobot was founded in 2010 to develop a cancer vaccine based on the research out of Dr. Ken Anderson and Dr. Nikhil Munshi's lab at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Dr. Anderson in particular, his dream has always been to develop a vaccine which would intervene in early stage multiple myeloma to stop the progression of the disease. Smoldering myeloma is an early stage or a precursor to multiple myeloma. At this time, there's really no active treatment for these patients. They're unfortunately given a diagnosis which is a little open-ended. They may progress or they may not progress, but a large portion of this patient population will eventually progress to active disease. So our goal is to intervene at this stage with moderate and high-risk patients in this disease space and stop their disease from going to active multiple myeloma. So PVX-410 is a therapeutic cancer vaccine designed to treat multiple myeloma. It's composed of 4 peptides, which are pieces of protein that are thought to be overexpressed on multiple myeloma cells. So the idea is that we are training the patient's immune system to target those specific cancer antigens and then hopefully kill those cells and stop the disease from progressing. PVX-410 is a very convenient drug to administer. It's an off-the-shelf vaccine, unlike other approaches. So you simply get an injection, much like you would at a flu shot. It's right under the skin, and you go home the same day. We started our first clinical trial in late 2012 in patients with moderate to high-risk smoldering myeloma. That trial's a phase 1/2 study. It was composed of 3 cohorts, a low dose, a target dose, which is the dose of vaccine that we're taking forward, and then a combination arm with lenalidomide or Revlimid. And we expect that study to be finished around the summertime of 2016.
Now, what about patients who are already in remission? There are typically few, if any, clinical trials available to these patients. At the recent ASH conference in Florida, we caught up with Dr. Yvonne Borrello, who's having success with a vaccine just for patients who want to extend remissions they already have.
Over the past several years, we've had significant advances in the treatment of myeloma, and the overall complete remission rate has significantly increased. However, what we're beginning to realize is that this is not a curable disease, and eventually these patients will fall out of remission. And so the concept is, what do we do with these patients? And the idea is that if we can come in with some sort of an immunotherapeutic approach, we can potentially maintain the durability of this remission for a longer period of time with minimal amounts of therapy and hopefully improve the overall quality and quantity of life of the patients.
Earlier studies showed that IMiDs, or immunomodulators like Revlimid, could boost the immune system. So Revlimid was used with this vaccine in the trial for patients in near complete remission.
We're defining near complete remission as patients that have a negative M spike but still have a positive immunofixation, or IFE. And so the idea was to see whether we could change the biology of the disease of patients that were in this stable but near complete remission state. And so what we did is we took patients that were on any Revlimid containing regimen. So it could be just Revlimid post-transplant or Revdex or RVD. And as long as they met these criteria, i.e. having achieved a near complete remission and holding that for 6 months, what we then did was drop all of their medicines except for Revlimid, and then they continued with a series of 4 vaccinations given at 1, 2, 3, and then 6 months. They continued with the Revlimid indefinitely. And so what we saw initially that was very exciting was that we had significant difficulty in actually accruing patients to the trial. And the reason for that is because it was difficult to keep people during that 6-month period still in that near complete remission state. And of the 17 patients that were not eligible to get on the vaccine, half of those patients were ineligible because they relapsed during that 6-month period, and the other half were ineligible because they developed a true complete remission. In other words, they became immunofixation negative. So technically, that's a better disease state than being in a near complete remission. Furthermore, because they were ineligible, they continued on all their therapies. So if they were on VRD, they continued on VRD. If they were on Revdex, they continued on Revdex. And the patients that went on to vaccination dropped all of their drugs except for Revlimid alone. So theoretically, if the vaccine did not work, the patients on the vaccine arm were actually getting less therapy than the patients that were on the quote-unquote observation arm. And what we saw from that study was that the median time to progression of the patients that were in the observation arm that continued on all their therapy was 10.8 months. And the median progression-free survival of the patients that got vaccinated hasn't been reached yet, and we are now out over 3.5 years. And we've only had 3 relapses, of which 2 of them were patients, when we modified the protocol, that allowed for a rising M spike. And 2 out of those 3 patients actually relapsed, which I think really speaks to the fact that if vaccines are going to work, they have to work in a setting of minimal residual disease. And of all of the patients that got vaccinated without that, which were 12, we've only had 1 relapse. And again, we're now out over 3 years.
As a follow-on for these encouraging results, Dr. Borrello is planning a new, large, multi-center 70 to 90 patient trial to open sometime this summer, and which will again include Revlimid and the vaccine for patients in near complete remission and complete remission.
The way we're going to design that trial is that we're going to take anybody that is on a Revlimid-containing regimen that has achieved either a CR or a near CR. We haven't discussed the stringent patients yet, but instead of waiting 6 months like we did for this trial, and because there's a control, we will only require 1 month of that and make sure that in that 1 month they're not relapsing, and then they will get this randomization, and the schedule is going to be different. So we will probably be vaccinating them at 1, 2, 3, 6 months, and every 6 months for up to 3 years. So to allow for this immune response to actually continue to improve over time.
This is great news for smoldering myeloma patients and patients in remission. But what about vaccine solutions for high-risk myeloma patients? These patients need new solutions the very most. Dr. Gunther Kona at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center is working on a vaccine called WT1, or Wilms Tumor 1, in combination with allogeneic or donor transplant for high-risk multiple myeloma patients.
The whole principle of stem cell transplantation or allogeneic stem cell transplantation is really the attempt to utilize the donor's immune system to treat disease. And the initial stages of allogeneic stem cell transplantation were gearing towards high-dose chemotherapy with the goal to really eliminate every single cancer cell if you get lucky and then have a better outcome. But it turned out to be that the high-dose chemotherapy is not really necessarily needed because it's not the treatment that treats the disease and can get somebody in long-lasting remission. The immune system of the donor, and particularly T cells that develop in the patient after the transplant and get sensitized in the bloodstream and learn to recognize tumor cells, are the ones that can induce a long-lasting remission and float around and find tumor cells that escaped a strong chemotherapy. These T cells have the capacity to really walk out of the bloodstream and go into the tissue and find tumor cells, and then they have the capacity to send signals to other cells and say, here is where the disease still is, come over and do something. This led to the development then of pre-priming T cells from the donor in the laboratory to make them specific for markers that are expressed on the myeloma cells. Accidentally, I discovered by following patients that got donor lymphocyte infusions after the transplantation that the majority of these patients developed a tumor-specific response against a marker that expressed on the myeloma cells, which is called W2-1 or Wilms tumor antigen 1. And this then changed the whole strategy how we approached patients with plasma cell leukemia by generating the T cells up front in the laboratory to make them specific and then infuse into the patient.
His results were so encouraging, even for plasma cell leukemia patients, that a new study was developed to test this WT1 vaccine with autologous transplant for patients with less aggressive forms of myeloma. Last year, I interviewed Dr. Larry Kwok at MD Anderson Cancer Center. He's doing work on a personalized vaccine. Dr. Muzaffar Qazilbash, also at MD Anderson, is doing work to combine this particular vaccine with a T-cell immunotherapy and stem cell transplant.
So this is how we did it. If you go to the idiotype vaccine arm, you get a vaccination, and about 2 weeks later, we will collect your T cells. These are the cells of the immune system that are supposed to be activated by the vaccine, and we will activate them in the laboratory. Then patient had their high-dose melphalan and autologous transplant, and then 2 days after transplant, they got their T cells, which were activated. And then they got 2 more booster vaccinations. If they were in the idiotype vaccine arm, they got 2 additional idiotype vaccine 1 month and 3 months after transplant. If they were in the control arm, same schedule, that you get the vaccine, we collect your T cells, you do the transplant, and then we give you T cells back, and then 2 booster vaccinations.
This current study by Dr. Qazilbash is now closed, and we look forward to seeing his future study open. More vaccine work is being done by Dr. David Avigan of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. The idea is to make transplant even better and more durable by eliminating minimal residual disease following transplant using a vaccine.
The goal of cancer vaccine as a therapy for myeloma is to try and introduce the immune system to the myeloma cells, to teach them essentially that these cells are foreign and to recognize them as something to be targeted and ultimately eradicated. And the way we do that is to try and understand, first of all, how myeloma cells first appear to the immune system in a way that's hard for it to see, and to sort of reverse that. The focus of our vaccine is to take patient-derived myeloma cells and to create a hybridoma, or fuse them together with teachers of the immune system called dendritic cells. And these cells are very powerful stimulators of new immune responses. And what we are doing by doing this is taking the material that is specific to that patient's myeloma and capturing all the different types of cells that make up their myeloma. And now, instead of them being hidden from the immune system, by fusing them together with these teachers, we basically stimulate prominent immune responses that cover a broad array of targets. And so this type of vaccine, which uses the patient-derived cells and is very personalized to that individual, has the ability to create a broad response that's harder for myeloma cells to evade. We've looked at this first in animals, and it's a very sort of powerful way of inducing immune responses that are protective against disease. And we then looked at this in a series of clinical trials, first phase 1 and then phase 2, where we were able to show that the vaccine stimulated very strong immune responses that were broad in nature. And importantly, in a study that we did in patients who had gone through autologous transplant and then had some residual disease, we were able to show that the immune response after transplant was very strong, and also was able to convert some of those patients from partial to complete responses. Based on that data, we've now embarked on a national trial involving the cooperative group called the CTN, which is sponsored through the NIH. And this trial, which is going to involve 15 cancer centers around the country, is going to look at patients who are going through transplant and then randomize patients to either get the vaccine plus lenalidomide maintenance and compare them to patients who get lenalidomide maintenance alone. And we're going to be doing some very elegant immune monitoring of those patients to understand what is the connection between our vaccine's ability to stimulate an immune response to hopefully protect patients from relapse, and how that then relates to the type of immune response that's generated.
Now, a theme I've been hearing often is that vaccines need to be used with a low tumor burden. And according to several myeloma specialists, that prime time may be post-transplant.
There is a notion that immune therapies may produce strong and durable responses, but are also somewhat slow to generate. So there is an idea that it's probably best to look at this in patients with a lower volume of disease. It's also thought that the immune system itself is disabled to some degree by having lots of disease around, and so the idea of first reducing disease burden to a low level and then using an immune-based therapy to educate the immune system to target what's left is thought to be a good sort of combination of strategies. In addition, there's some evidence that the transplant itself, the process of getting high-dose chemotherapy and then stem cells afterwards, sort of resets the immune system and disables some of the ways that the tumor cell hides from the immune system, that what we call tumor-mediated tolerance. And so there's actually an opportunity, as people are recovering for transplant, to stimulate immune responses that are harder to do in other settings in myeloma.
I've been hearing lately about many doctors talking about segmenting patients into fitness categories like fit, unfit, and frail, and making treatment decisions based on those categories and not on age. Receiving aggressive treatment or being on treatment for long periods of time can take a toll on our bodies, and we need to do whatever we can to stay as fit as possible.
I think that in general, when patients are exercising and are active, they tell me that they're feeling better. They, it seems a little counterintuitive, but exercise actually helps with energy. So each patient is different, and what they're able to do is different. So for some, exercising is walking around their block or walking around their yard or going out and doing a little bit of gardening. And then I have some patients who are training for a marathon this coming January.
We're starting a new program called Muscles for Myeloma. This is a fitness challenge that will run from Monday, March 1st until April 30th. For these 2 months, we invite you to create your own fitness plan, whatever that is, and join us. You can create your own Muscles for Myeloma page at the link below. Customize your page with a photo or even a video and tell us what you plan to do to get moving. We're all at different fitness levels, and any plan is a good plan. Then you can invite your friends and family to sponsor your page. They can pledge to donate for each minute you exercise, or just make a donation to get you motivated to move. We're also joining local walks, runs, and other races around the country, so watch for those in future articles and find one to join in our list on the right sidebar of the Myeloma Crowd website. All funds raised will be donated to 2 specific immunotherapy myeloma research projects as part of the Myeloma Crowd Research Initiative. Thanks so much for watching, and here's to a happy and healthy you.